Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start our news bulletin from Pakistan, where 16 people have been killed in an accident after a passenger wagon was run over by a train at a crossing in Sheikhupura city of the Punjab province. Police say a majority of those travelling in the passenger wagon were Sikh pilgrims visiting Pakistan for religious pilgrimage. He said the train was headed from Karachi to Lahore. The French presidency says Prime Minister Edouard Philippe and his government have resigned. This comes ahead of President Emmanuel Macron's planned cabinet reshuffle, laying the ground for 2022 elections. The Élysée Palace says a new Prime Minister will be named in the next few hours. It said the current government will continue to handle day-to-day matters until a new one is formed. In French government reshuffles, the Prime Minister tenders his or her resignation before cabinet appointments, but can still be renamed to the position. But it is not yet clear whether Philippe will be called upon to form the new government. Earlier last week, Macron lost big in the nationwide municipal elections, being seen as a referendum on his policies. The US has reported a record of 53,096 new cases of COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, as the total number of infections climbed past 2.7 million. Brazil surpassed 60,000 deaths from the coronavirus after recording more than 1,000 fatalities in the last 24 hours. The virus has killed over 520,000 people worldwide and infected more than 10.8 million. This report has the details.
The new coronavirus is once again surging in the Americas, especially the United States. The number of confirmed cases in the US climbed to an all-time high of more than 50,000 for the second consecutive day. 40 out of 50 states are now reporting a spike in new infections as the country struggles to handle the pandemic. As cases skyrocket in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott has made face covering mandatory in all public places.
One of the best ways to keep businesses open while also slowing the spread is for everyone to wear a face covering like this when they go out. Medical studies have shown that wearing a face covering slows the spread of COVID-19 and it protects you and your family.
Meanwhile, in Africa, the Nigerian state of Kano ended its lockdown months after the outbreak, originally called a mysterious disease, killing hundreds of citizens. Ghana has pardoned 794 prisoners as part of measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in cluttered prisons. The World Health Organization has urged African governments to take effective measures to mitigate the risk of a surge in infections. The Global Health Body also said there is very little risk that pets can infect their owners with COVID-19. In Asia, South Korea has reported 63 new coronavirus cases, triggering the return of tighter social distancing curbs in Seoul.
It is concerning, as small clusters are emerging in a wide range of areas, making it harder for local governments and prevention workers doing epidemiological surveys.
Tokyo has confirmed 107 new coronavirus infections, its highest daily tally in 2 months. But Japan's chief cabinet secretary said there is no need to reintroduce a state of emergency.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 78 more people have died of COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, with the death toll rising to 4,551. The health ministry says some 4,000 new cases were detected, taking the tally of infections to nearly 222,000. The ministry said nearly 114,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. Officials said 2,479 patients are critically ill. The province of Sindh is badly hit by the virus, with over 89,000 infections. Punjab has reported nearly 79,000 cases. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the tally of infections has crossed 27,000, while there are nearly 11,000 cases in Balochistan. The capital city, Islamabad, has reported over 13,000 cases, while Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan have recorded more than 2,500 infections. In India, one of the most wanted criminals have killed 8 policemen, including 4 officers in northern Uttar Pradesh state. UP Police Director General H.C. Awasthi says 5 others have been wounded. Police had raided Bikru village in Kanpur district to arrest Vikas Dubey, a dreaded gangster facing 60 criminal cases, including murder. Dubey and his gang blocked all the roads leading to the village. They ambushed the raiding police with indiscriminate firing from rooftops. Awasthi said the slain officers include a deputy superintendent and 3 sub-inspectors. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has discussed bilateral ties and matters of mutual interest with his Danish counterpart Jeppe Kofod. In a video conference, the two sides exchanged views on the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on economy. He expressed hope that Denmark will support the coordinated actions to create fiscal space needed by the developing countries to deal with the crisis. Qureshi also briefed the Danish minister on Pakistan's efforts to contain the virus. The Danish foreign minister offered condolences on the loss of precious lives in the terrorist attack on the Pakistan Stock Exchange building earlier this week. The Taliban have rejected a Pentagon report stating that the Islamic Emirate continues to support Al-Qaeda in the region. In a statement, spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said the US should stop individuals in its military from propagating a false narrative. Mujahid said the Emirates does not support any foreign organization in the region or any other place. He assured the Taliban are committed to the implementation of the Doha Pact and bringing comprehensive peace to Afghanistan. The Taliban spokesperson warned that propaganda at this sensitive time could be counterproductive for peace efforts. He said there are individuals in the US military who still seek war in Afghanistan for their personal interests or the interests of the defense companies. Washington has expressed concern over Beijing's military exercises in the South China Sea. It accused China of further destabilizing the disputed waters. In a statement, the Defense Department said holding drills in the disputed territory was counterproductive to the efforts of easing tensions. The Pentagon said the exercises will assert unlawful maritime claims and disadvantage Beijing's Southeast Asian neighbors in the region. This comes after Beijing started 5 days of drills from July the 1st near the Paracel Islands, which are claimed by both Vietnam and China. Washington accuses Beijing of militarizing South China Sea to intimidate its neighbors who might want to exploit its extensive oil and gas reserves. Beijing claims 90% of the energy-rich waters, but Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam also lay partial claims. The US is looking to seize the fuel aboard 4 Iranian tankers bound for Venezuela to ramp up pressure on both sanctions-hit countries. The Columbia District Court issued a warrant to confiscate over 1.1 million barrels of gasoline after a civil lawsuit was filed. The US Justice Department said the warrant is based on the probable cause that the fuel aboard vessels Bella, Bering, Pandi, and Luna is forfeitable. The lawsuit also aims to stop the flow of oil sales revenues to Tehran, which remains under US sanctions over its nuclear program. Legal experts say the gasoline can only be seized if the tankers enter US territorial waters and if Washington can prove the gasoline to be forfeitable under law. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro remains defiant in the face of US attempts to oust him through diplomatic and economic measures. Qatar has once again rejected Israel's annexation plans, Jewish settlements, and Judaization of Jerusalem. A team led by Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh met with Qatar's foreign minister Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani in Doha. The team praised Doha for supporting the Palestinian people. Al Thani said Qatar will continue to support all efforts to ensure national unity in Palestine. Israel's new government is expected to present its strategy this month for implementing the deal of the century proposed by the US President Donald Trump. The plan gives Israel a free hand to annex large parts of the West Bank, including the Jordan Valley, which Israel occupied in 1967. Meanwhile, Palestine's political factions and pro-Palestine activists have protested in the occupied territories and abroad against Israel's annexation plan. Turkey has accused the United Arab Emirates of embarking on a campaign to stifle democratic movements in the Middle East and North Africa. Turkey's ambassador to UN, Feridun Sinirlioglu, called on the Security Council to remind the UAE of its duty under international law. Sinirlioglu said Abu Dhabi is excessively ambitious to dominate the wider region, which is resulting in nothing but human suffering. He said the UAE must stop its destructive and malicious policies in the region. The UAE is part of a Saudi-led coalition that launched an air campaign to roll back Houthi territorial gains in 2015. This further escalated the crisis in Yemen. The Turkish envoy also accused Abu Dhabi of supporting Khalifa Haftar forces in Libya, wanting to oust the UN-recognized government in the country. In Libya, 6 more corpses have been unearthed from mass graves in the western city of Tarhuna. In a statement, Libya's government said the bodies were unearthed during ongoing excavation work. The statement said a total of 30 corpses have been found in Tarhuna so far. Libyan authorities have announced there were 11 mass graves in and around the city. The Libyan army recently inflicted heavy blows on Khalifa Haftar's forces and liberated the cities of Tripoli and Tarhuna. Libya has been torn by civil wars since the ouster of late ruler Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The International Organization for Migration says the Libyan Coast Guard rescued 102 illegal immigrants off the country's western coast. IOM said its staff will provide assistance to Libyan Coast Guard at the disembarkation point. The organization said nearly 300 migrants were rescued by the Coast Guard in the past day. IOM estimates that more than 5,400 immigrants have been rescued and returned to Libya so far in 2020. The state of violence in Libya makes the country a preferred point of departure for thousands of illegal immigrants wanting to cross into Europe. The chair of the African Union Commission has urged Ethiopians to refrain from violence following the death of singer Hachalu Hundessa. This comes after the protests that follow Hundessa's death claimed at least 81 lives. In a statement, Musa Faki Mehmet also called on the government of Ethiopia to bring the perpetrators to justice. He said the Commission encourages all the sides to resolve differences through dialogue and peaceful means. Mehmet reaffirmed support for the Ethiopian government in their efforts to promote a stable and prosperous country. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has warned he will not tolerate any further destruction of public property and infrastructure. Internet service remains suspended across the country since Tuesday. More stories to follow, but right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back. Venezuela has reversed an earlier decision to expel the EU ambassador in response to the blocked sanctions on Caracas. President Nicolas Maduro says the step has been taken after agreeing with the bloc to maintain the framework of diplomatic relations. Maduro said Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza and EU's Foreign Minister Josep Borrell spoke over a phone call to resolve the issue. Speaking at a military event in Caracas, he said it was an appropriate decision as the world will get to hear the truth about Venezuela.
Foreign Minister Arreaza has informed Joseph Borrell that as the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, I have decided to suspend the expulsion of the European Union ambassador in Caracas to publish a joint communique between both institutions, like we've done, and to proceed to a new stage of dialogue between the High Representative, Joseph Borrell, and the Foreign Minister of the Bolivarian Republic, Jorge Arreaza.
Maduro said he had suspended the orders to open a new stage of dialogue with the 27-country bloc. Now, moving on, the European Court of Human Rights has condemned the treatment of 3 men asylum seekers living in France. In a judgment, the court described their living condition as inhuman and degrading. The court concluded that officials had failed in their duties and that the 3 men had been living on the street without shelter or resources of any kind. They had been sleeping without access to sanitary facilities and in constant fear of being attacked or robbed for several months. The judgment is based on Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The judgment also imposed a monetary penalty on the state, obliging it to pay each of the 3 asylum seekers between 10,000 and 12,000 euros. Russia says its S-500 Prometheus defense system will be capable of destroying hypersonic weapons in near-Earth space. In a statement, Russian Airspace Forces Commander Sergei Surovikin said the S-500 is the first-generation space defense network. Surovikin said the air defense system currently has no equivalent in the world, and it can also destroy aerodynamic and ballistic targets. He said the weapon's main tasks will include combating medium-range ballistic missiles and intercontinental ballistic missiles in close proximity. The Prometheus, also known as a Triumphator M, is a universal combination of long-range and high-altitude interception with increased missile defense potential. Russia's defense ministry says the cutting-edge defense system will be deployed in 2021. An Indian judge is under pressure to delete comments from a court order which questioned the behavior of a woman who claimed she was raped. Granting bail to the rape accused last week, Justice Krishna Dixit of the Karnataka High Court said he found the woman's statement difficult to believe. Justice Dixit went on to ask why the woman had gone to her office at night at 11 p.m. and why did she not object to consuming drinks with him. His remarks set off a storm of protests across the capital for victim blaming. Outraged Indians asked if there was a rule book or a guide to being a rape victim. Appealing to the Supreme Court judges to intervene, senior lawyer Aparna Bhatt said the judge's remarks showed misogyny at its worst. Rape and sexual crimes have been in the spotlight in India since December 2012 after the Delhi rape case sparked days of protests and made global headlines. A UN-led report has found that the world dumped a record of 53.6 million tons of e-waste in 2019. The Global E-Waste Monitor 2020 report said just 17.4% of the waste was recycled. The report found that China, with 10.1 million tons, was the biggest contributor to e-waste, and the US was second with 6.9 million tons. It said India comes third with 3.2 million tons. Global warming is just one issue cited by the report, as it noted 98 million tons of carbon dioxide was released into the atmosphere due to inadequate recycling. This year's coronavirus lockdowns have exacerbated the problem. Social media platform Twitter is dropping the terms master, slave and blacklist in favor of more inclusive language. The terms are frequently used in programming codes which originated decades ago. Experts say replacing the terms can cost millions and take months. In programming speak, master refers to the main version of the code that controls the slaves or replicas. Blacklist is used to describe items that are automatically denied, typically forbidden websites. US bank JP Morgan has also announced a similar move following the killing of George Floyd by police in Minneapolis. Global brands are also looking carefully at their product logos and names to avoid racial stereotyping. The South American trade bloc has held a virtual summit to finalize its impending trade agreement with the EU, among other agenda issues. In a joint statement, the Southern Common Market Alliance agreed to introduce a collective policy to tackle the economic and social impacts of COVID-19. The MERCOSUR members also discussed the trade deals with Canada, Singapore, and South Korea, along with reviewing adjustments to their common external tariff. Ministers also deliberated the final text of a trade agreement with the EU ahead of a summit meeting with Brussels. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro called on the negotiators to conclude the final text so that it can be signed this semester. Bolsonaro reassured the bloc that he was working to undo the damage caused by his administration's policies on the Amazon and its indigenous people.
The historic successes celebrated in 2019 with the European Union and the European Trade Association show that we are on the right path. We applaud the dedication of the Paraguayan presidency to completing the outstanding details in these accords. I appeal to all the presidents so that, as I did myself, you instruct your negotiators to finish the texts.
The election of Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez last year had cast doubts on the accord, but he said he will not obstruct the deal despite wanting to try and renegotiate it. Now moving on, European stocks are rather muted despite upbeat economic data out of the US and China, while a spike in the US coronavirus infections tempered optimism. The pan-European stock 600 are hovering just below the flat line, with tech stocks leading gains only to be annulled by falling banks. London's FTSE lost marginally as hopes of a trade deal with the EU dwindles. Paris CAC's 42 slipped fractionally after the French Prime Minister and his government resigned. Germany's DAX was the only stock trading up fractionally despite the local news reporting a 40% plunge in car sales in the country. Earlier Asian stocks advanced after a survey showed that China's services sectors grew at its fastest pace in over a decade in June. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.